Welcome to USA Football's Coach and Coordinator Podcast, where top football coaches from around the country share their stories, philosophies, concepts, and strategies to help you get better on and off the field. Now, here's your host, Keith Grabowski.
Before we get going with today's podcast, I just wanted to share a couple things with you. Number one, please check out the Football for All podcast. It's designed for your youth audience, but if you are the head football coach who really runs everything in your community, I think it'll be very helpful to you. It explains what we're doing with the football development model, as well as get some good perspective from different types of stakeholders, whether those be current or former NFL players, current high school, college, or NFL coaches, as well as parents and commissioners. It's really designed for that parent, commissioner, and coach group from your youth audience. And I think it'd be helpful if you would push coaches that way. Also, as you get going here and the country opens up, I know getting your players in shape and getting them ready with some of the skills they need, like tackling, blocking, and defeating blocks, are going to be important, but you're probably going to be limited as far as contact goes right now. Check out our contact system, which is designed for all those types of things. You won't see a single drill really with any helmet on, and there's very few drills where shoulder pads are required. You could get those going now to really work on some of those skills and fundamentals, and check out our advanced tackling system designed around the 5 fights. I think you'll really find that that's an excellent coaching system as well. Check those out at footballdevelopment.com. Here we go with today's podcast. Enjoy. For all the guys out there, I know Coach Stacchiotti because he played for us at Baldwin-Wallace. He was a linebacker, and I always kept trying to borrow him to come over to the good side to play a little bit of fullback for us, and he did that. And
best fullback you had.
That's right. Only one. But, you know, I think the biggest thing is we saw this guy was a worker. So just to see him progress, I know everybody who had the opportunity to get to know him, whether that's been a coach or a player, has been really excited about the success he's had, and to see him grow in this profession and now to be the head strength and conditioning coach at Pitt, I think is huge. So Mike, I appreciate you taking the time today. Again, go ahead and present. A lot of guys will see this in the playback.
To see kind of how, you know, you built out this podcast based on, you know, you taught like building it out when I was just finishing up school and seeing where it's at now. It's awesome. You know, I'm not big on presenting stuff, or, you know, I think a lot of coaches in strength and conditioning now, they build their brand. It's kind of their thing. And I kind of stay out of the light in that sense as much as I can, just because, you know, I want my work to speak for itself and not be a social media guru or whatever that may be. But so you might not have that many viewers. I don't know. I don't really promote too much or anything like that, but I'm thankful to be on this, you know, podcast with you, to be able to talk shop a little bit. But I didn't have any like subject that I wanted to just cover, because I'm not an expert in any single thing. I don't want to come off as somebody that's a guru. You know, I know a lot because I worked with, you know, a lot of great people and experienced a lot of cool stuff, but at the same time, I'm not an expert in any way. So I kind of wanted this to be open. I found a lot of the times where I learned the most wasn't from going to presentations on specific subjects, but when I was just sitting there talking shop with different coaches. You know, I coached at the high school level, you know, mid-major level in college, major college, NFL. So I know some stuff, but I don't know everything. And, you know, I'm excited to, you know, kind of see what comes up, see some like Q&A stuff coming in.
Yeah. Well, I think, Mike, what would be valuable is to talk a little bit about those different levels and the differences you see. And, you know, we will get a lot of high school coaches in here, I'm sure, thinking about how they approach and how they do things with their program. And I mean, you were a gym rat for us. So you lived in the weight room, loved the weight room. You know, just thinking it from that approach, how would you not only just develop strength, but develop that full athlete? Because I think that's been a huge part of your education now. You've learned not just to get in a weight room and throw the weights around, but you're looking at developing every aspect of what it takes to be an elite athlete, right? And certainly we want to translate that to our high school kids as well.
So yeah, I mean, absolutely. There's a lot of differences in all the levels, but there's a lot of similarities because strength and conditioning, no matter what, is still strength and conditioning, and there's fundamental principles that apply to, you know, a high school athlete, a junior high athlete, that are the same as the application for a collegiate athlete or professional athlete. The differences come in, obviously, you know, you have talent levels, you have genetic makeup. You know, you have genes that are expressed different, and there's really no way we could track that. Not that it matters, but also, you know, when you look at it, you just have to understand the skill levels. You have training ages, biological ages that you have to consider that, you know, apply into those fundamental principles. So when I was a high school strength coach, I actually was, you know, and this wasn't very long ago. You know, I'm young in the field. I was so bad. I was terrible. But at the same time, the guys got so much stronger and so much better, and they're in shape. But, like, I did so much dumb stuff looking back. But I'm highly critical of myself. Like, I was doing, you know, elevated deadlifts. Like, I was doing stuff that it's like, I shouldn't have done that. It's so stupid. But the beauty of training high school athletes and junior high athletes is you could be very, very simple, and the, you know, stimulus, the stress that you elicit on their body is going to, you know, elicit the response that you desire of them becoming stronger, you know, faster. But even at the level that we're at now, the high level of college in the ACC and even in the NFL, kind of the mentors I was brought up with kept it simple. You know, we didn't do extremely complex movements simply because would you rather get the results or spend the time coaching the finer points of a complex movement just so they could get good at the movement and have limited, you know, transferability.
Right.
So, you know, that being said, I've been through different programs where I was with Olympic-based programs where people do, you know, snatches and cleans and snatch balances, push jerks, split jerks, all of that. And then I worked with programs that did more of a hit style, like machine-based training or powerlift-based training. And then, so taking all of that, I kind of have an eclectic view on movements. I'm not an Olympic-based program, but I still do clean pulls and snatch grip pulls when it's appropriate. I do a lot of jumps, a lot of med ball throws, you know, bench squat, deadlift, trap bar deadlift, you know.
Right.
And then the accessory work is, you know, extremely eclectic as well, just based off of things that I've seen that my staff's seen. So my staff also, they're not all like-minded like me, which is good. They challenge me in a really good way to, you know, get the best out of the programming. But yeah, I mean, like I said in numerous interviews, I steal from Buddy Morris. I don't have a philosophy. Philosophies are for philosophers, and I just steal whatever I can from watching videos and things that I've been exposed to, and
Yeah.
you know, things like that, just to get the most out of it. So
Yeah. And, you know, I think back to trying to think if it might have been your freshman year and we were still over at the rec center and we could only lift from like 6 a.m. till 8 when it opened. Do you remember this? Were you there?
Yeah.
And that was, I was in charge of it that year. And I mean, I knew enough to be dangerous. I was not a strength and conditioning coach by training. I mean, I did some basic certifications and knew enough to get through. But, you know, I found it, you know, what I needed to do was to keep it simple for you guys because we didn't have a lot of space or a lot of time. And for me, that was the key. I mean, you know, sometimes you get caught up and you see all these cool things on the internet. And I see Coach Walsh has a couple questions here I'll get to in a second. And Coach Foreman, thanks for joining us. You know, that idea of being able to keep it simple rather than looking at all these complex things you can do. Because at the end of the day, you know, it's what they can translate onto the field. So, yes, we want them to have some great numbers in their lifts. But, you know, these guys are not going on to be in an Olympic weightlifting competition either. So I think that kind of gets to Coach Wallace's question, that, you know, type of lifting, and his question was pyramid, eccentric, velocity based. I'll let you take that.
Yeah. So what we do is, you know, our meat and potatoes here at Pitt, you know, for the upper extremity, is various rows, loaded on vertical and horizontal pulling, bench, variations of bench, several different variations. We like to conjugate a lot, which is just switching up the movement, rather taking a bench from a flat bench to an incline or using specialty bars. We'd like to do that to kind of, keep the stimulus fresh for the guys and, make sure they're not getting too accustomed to movements. I think with the lower body, our big things are squat, variations of squat, normal squat, split squat, rear foot elevated split squat, box squats are, big. And obviously deadlift is another one that we hang our hat on. Generally trap bar, we will, with select athletes, get into sumo deadlifts. And then jumping is another big thing for us. So that's our kind of our meat and potatoes. And that's a lot of different stuff and different variable movements, just because we don't want to pigeonhole into having just one mindset, because there's so many different ways. There's 1,000 ways to skin a cat, and we want to exhaust our resources to ensure that we're getting the most bang for our buck for our guys. When it comes to our, programming style, I think the best way I could put it is that it's an agile periodization style model. I just actually read Jovanovic's book that kind of went over it, and that's probably the best way to explain the model we use. Where Plan B style program, I could write 8 weeks of a program out, and first week it's completely changed. In the middle of the week I could change it just based off of what you see with the athletes. And with all that, conjugating the movements, undulating intensities and repetitions, every 2 to 3 weeks, just ensuring that we're keeping the stimulus fresh for the guys. And then I think the other part of the programming that, can describe it is that, I know I said probably like 3 times, a little redundant, but we're not pigeonholed into saying like we're block periodization, we're, powerlifting based program. We utilize percentages as well as velocity-based training programs. We're trying to build out velocity profiles on guys using Tendo units along with percentages, just to ensure that they're training optimally and not maximally or minimally, just making sure that what we're doing yields the results that we want with the least amount of, diminishing returns and soreness for the guys.
So I know I saw you in that interview talking about the use of technology, and you just, mentioned a little bit of that there. Talk to us about, the technology that you use and how you're using it. And I guess the other part that would probably be interesting, if you didn't have that technology, what would you use to monitor your athletes to be able to tell you how to adjust, your program?
Here comes a rant, because I worked with Anthony Paroli, who is one of the most forward-thinking strength coaches, I think, in the country. He's one of the smartest people, not just strength coaches, that I know. And he built out the sports science program at the Arizona Cardinals and did a really good job collaborating with him, Buddy, and, Jamie from Catapult. They built a great model out there, and we brought it to Mississippi State and we brought it to Tampa Bay, and we had tremendous success. And the thing with, technology and sports science, people think that, sports science is this crazy thing. Sports science is just strength and conditioning. It's just a way to get objective data to base your, training off of. That's all it is, unless you're doing, research studies and things of that matter. Like I like to think, Dave Hamilton, we hired at Tampa Bay as a head sports scientist, him and Jordan Dudas. Their title is sports science because they do all the analytics and stuff. But realistically, they're just a branch of strength and conditioning. They're just doing the analytics of it. And I don't want to like bash anybody or anything like that, but I'm tired of people putting too much into the technology and not enough into the coaching end of it, because it's an art and a science. I saw someone that they always post awesome graphs, and charts and stuff, colorful things. And, obviously they're utilizing the technology and doing a good job at it. But then they had an athlete do a squat on a box and with a significant weight. And I was excited to see let's see what this guy does. Because they do all this cool stuff if they think they're forward thinking and ahead of the curve. And this dude just smashes down on the box and looks like he's about to blow his L5 out of his, back. like, you know what? Like, at what extent is technology more important or less important? Or, you know, you got to find how to use it and how to be meaningful, and then not let that be the master. I could sit here and give you a bunch of charts and a bunch of objective data, and it's useless if I can't go on the floor and apply it. And if I don't know how to, you know, and kids coming up now, like when I was in school and being brought up, like you just had to be able to coach before you knew anything about periodization, anything about, you know, just programming in general. You had to know how to coach movements and coach people. Now I think people are getting too caught up in the side of, you know, the technology and, you know, the literature of strength and conditioning without the application of it. You know, I'm not saying that's a general thing I'm saying, but, you know, you can't put one thing as the master. Everything matters. And obviously they're great tools, but you don't have to have it. I could get Pitt ready for a season with cinder blocks and sandbags. You know, we're kind of going through a period now where we have limited resources, and a lot of people are very scared and very nervous about it. Like, I'm not, you know, the closer to the season we're to get, I'm gonna be very nervous. But right now, like, there's ways to get the guys prepped and ready to the point where you're building up resilience. You don't need the technology and everything like that. We utilize Catapult. We utilize ForceDeck software with force plates. We had centralized databases. We had all this stuff, but what it comes down to is you have to be able to coach the athletes and get them prepared. Now, objective data could be anything from getting GPS, you know, IMA and player load velocities, all of that. If you don't have that, you could simply like time your athletes and have, you know, rated perceived exertion charts for athletes, it's questionnaires, things like that as a subjective data that you can utilize. Then obviously you have your percentages, you have the loads, and you just monitor those and track progress there. Body weights, if you have the ability to do, you know, you're in specific gravity, you could do that. And, you know, there's so many data points that you could use, and it doesn't really matter the data points that you use as long as it's useful. Mm-hmm. You know, I could give a coach a Catapult report and it's useless because they don't understand what it's reading out. You know, you could be a high school coach that has access to Catapult. Just because you have it doesn't mean it's worth anything. You know, what you have and what you can utilize and the success you have depends on your ability to use it, you know. But that's kind of a rant there. But I'm tired of hell, you know, people's, because I feel dumb. I go online and I'm not a dumb person, but I see all this stuff that people are doing, and a lot of it I'm like, oh man, like that's really cool. I'm an idiot. Like, why am I not doing that? Then I see them train the guys. I'm like, this house, never mind. You know, but then there's people that are really awesome and do a lot of great stuff. I feel like an idiot. They coach really well too. I just feel even more like an idiot, but I'm competitive.
Well, I think, yeah, Mike, it's like any aspect of coaching. I mean, you're going to be best by coaching what you know, and your athletes are going to be better for it, right? If you go out there and try to do things that right now you're not ready to do, you're going to have some issues. I've got a couple questions here from Coach Walsh. The first one is, you know, the 3 to 4 lifts you'd recommend for high school, kind of, I guess, as maybe some of the core lifts.
You know, high school athletes, it depends. Like, I couldn't tell you where, you know, the most bang for your buck would be. I think my biggest and best suggestion is that you have to analyze your athletes and where they're at. You know, there's a lot that goes into, you know, what you choose to do for your athletes. So, you know, I couldn't tell you if you have a underdeveloped high school athlete, I wouldn't, you know, be able to tell you how you would train him specifically compared to a kid that's a senior that failed 3 times and has hit puberty twice, you know, things like that. You know, I think the best advice I could give is just to keep it simple. You know, everybody can sprint, everybody can jump. Body weight movements are huge, and getting the movement pattern down, working those motor unit recruitment to do specific, you know, light loaded or body weight movements. And then I think simple things like, you know, I like squatting, but progressing it simply from, you know, maybe a goblet squat with a dumbbell down to a bench so they learn the pattern and the angles of their body, which is subjective to all their bodies, and then progress that into maybe a barbell front squat, back squat, deadlifting. I think, that became something that became very taboo for a long time. I think it's an important movement because if you're going to start into Olympic-based movements, cleans and all of that, like, you're going to have to deadlift the bar off the ground. So teaching them the position of having a good angle with the back and, working all those angles specific, and, sumo deadlift would be a great one as well. I love sumo deadlift, trap bar deadlifts. And then obviously dumbbell bench, push-ups, pull-ups are huge. There's so much you can do without getting, too cute with it. You don't have to do like man makers where you're deadlifting, cleaning, overhead pressing, spinning the bar on one finger, whatever they do. You keep it simple and they're going to reap the benefit of it. I think there's some great high school strength coaches out there. I know there's great high school strength coaches out there that are, doing great jobs, and they even coach Olympic movements, and they do a great job at that. But, I think, when it comes down to it, keep it simple, get them strong, and roll. It's not that hard. It's only as hard as you make it on yourself.
I know, Mike, and we got a question about plyometrics I'll ask next, but thinking back on that, and I mean, we did it as players, right? Back to, I'm much older than you, Mike, so back to when I played in, the late 80s.
Leather helmets.
It is really big to be in, the different strength clubs, whether that was something for the bench or the total lifts. And we kind of then put the, analytics on how our kids are doing in their strength on those few lifts, which, I think you make a good point. Some of those kids are just learning how to do those. So it might not show up that they're getting stronger because they're technique-wise, right? They may not be there. So if you took the emphasis off of that, or you were at a place, I remember being in one of the high schools I coached, we had, 2 squat racks, 2 benches, and about 6 bars. We had to get creative with, we've got a whole bunch of truck tires and lead pipes and stuff like that. But I couldn't necessarily be always measuring because that wasn't going to be something I could get all those guys through. So if you're taking the emphasis off about worrying like about the technique heavy type of lifts, how are you measuring, or how would you measure their progress to be able to see that?
So if you could just flat load things. So when I was at the high school setting, what I did was for the main movements, I undershot everything. You gotta remember, that was like my first job. And so I undershot everything to ensure that guys weren't getting buried under bars. But I was running around like a madman, like just trying to get numbers down. And if that's something you don't want to do, and you have kids that you could trust, you have to kind of roll with workout cards and have guys write down their weights and numbers. And you have to go through and check and say like, hey, last set, let me see it. Or if you have an assistant coach that isn't necessarily a strength coach, but a football coach, they can tell if somebody's failing or not. You know what I mean? But the other thing is just use a standardized weight. So, your upperclassmen that are maybe stronger, they do, 135. Guys that are kind of developed in the middle area, 115 on whatever movement. And then the young guys, they use 95 pounds. And this is all just generic numbers I'm throwing out. But have that standardized weight that they're using on the movements. And that way you don't have to worry about, slapping on weights and everything like that, and ensuring that it's weight that you are undershooting. I can't emphasize that enough. I still, to this day, like on max days and stuff, I'll have guys hit a number. It's not truly like a max day. We'll get like a repetition-based percentage. I'll still knock it down, 10 pounds, 20 pounds, like just to ensure that, I'm not burying these guys, because at a certain point, they're going to, that weight's going to beat them in, making sure that they're having success too. That, you don't get good at, having success by failing. So I flat load things, keep it as simple as possible. I used to, at Girard, we had a new weight room that we had designed when I was going into my senior year, but it was a small space. But I had a back locker room area where I had guys doing body weight stuff like step ups or push ups or whatever. And so they're back there where I could just kind of peek in and make sure they're doing okay. And station setup was just preset weights. And then you could kind of just have an idea and just, use progressive overload and just bump up 5 pounds each week. And, you might have remember like one kid's really strong. So like, hey, like when you go, let's slap on a 25, something like that,
Yeah.
That's the best way to go about it in my mind. And I'm sure there's a lot of different ways and opinions on it from guys that were better high school strength coaches than I was, because I wasn't that good, I don't think. But just keep it basic. Just make sure that you set the governor. That's the biggest thing. You set the governor, and they're kids. You dictate the weight and what they do, and if they got a problem with it, they're a kid. Tell them about themselves.
Yeah, with the plyometrics, and I had Micah Kurtz, who's in Carolina, as a high school strength and conditioning coach, was actually NSCA Coach of the Year in 2018, and we talked about back at the beginning of this, the strength, right? That guys can really keep their strength around. If they did nothing, it'd start disappearing maybe in 20 days or so. So they can maintain their strength, even build their strength during this period. The speed portion of this, that they have to keep working on: running, sprinting, plyometrics. And I know we have a question here from Coach Walsh about plyometrics. What specific plyometrics you use?
So I think the big thing is we differentiate between like plyometrics being what plyometrics are, which is actually having a rebound, a stretch reflex, compared to, something like a box jump, where we're not box jump, you would go static to dynamic, but then we'll progress something like that where it's low impact, especially with our bigger guys. They'll just do variations of box jumps just because we don't want those forces going through. A lot of those guys have frames that they're just slapping weight on that, is unnatural to them. So their joints are, they get lit up quickly. So we keep the impacts low on the big guys through box jumps and various style of box jumps. And when it comes to true plyometrics, we do that with select mid athletes or big skill athletes and skill athletes, where we'll work into, reactive, low hurdle reactive plyometric jump, working, forces in different directions, hurdle jumps. We'll get into those various hurdle jumps, bounding, skipping, and obviously, like for everybody, sprinting is a low form of plyometric movement for them. And then implementing our sprinting and bounding together in different aspects to teach how to overcome their body and transition into a movement. And that's something we're going to hit a little bit more towards the summer. But then the other thing too is just working a decel, which isn't like necessarily plyometric, but I'd kind of put that in the same category for our sake here at Pitt. Working different decels, multi-directional decelerations, working with throwing the hands, catching the body, and teaching them how to absorb their body weight. And then we'll progress into utilizing medicine balls to decel and progress the distance that they're jumping, even med ball throws overhead, med ball throws at the chest, all of that. That's what we kind of utilize for our jumping and plyometrics and medicine ball work. But we differentiate between a true plyometric, a box jump, and then the various medicine ball works that we do to ensure that each part is being programmed properly to ensure that it's eliciting the response that we want in the athlete. So it's not just a general deal, and it's all progressed over time, just make it a little bit more complex and more, difficult by making it more reactive. We would normally generally go from something where we jump and stabilize to something where we jump and react into different movements. So that's kind of how we go about it. And there's a ton of different things we do with that.
Yeah. With the decel, I don't think I've had anybody talk about that aspect of it on the podcast. Talk to us about why that's important. And if you could, Coach, just share a real simple progression that our coaches could implement.
Yeah. So, decel is just, learn to decelerate your body and absorb the forces, from the ground through your body. Make sure you're able to stabilize and have your body in the position that's, safe. Because in the sport of football, and really any sport, you get thrown around, you're doing awkward movements, you have to cut, you have to absorb a lot of forces. So what we do, aside from, the cutting drills, is we'll just start out with body weight, where we'll stand on one leg, hands overhead, and just jump out, land on the opposite leg, and make sure they're stabilizing in the knee joint, make sure they're not going valgus in the knee joint. And then, to progress the forward, we will load them up with the med ball, various weights, and then they'll jump out, stabilize, and then we'll increase the distance. We'll start out, try to jump out, a yard or yard and a half, and try to progress that up as much as we can. And then, and that's subjective as well. Sometimes we'll see a guy that's doing really well and be like, hey, just try to get a little further this time, or like have a heavier med ball. And then you could go lateral where your lead leg is up. You go diagonal across the body, jump, stick, and make sure, same thing, that, you get, your ankle stable, your knees stable, that you're not walking, waddling around, core stabilizes in your good athletic position. And you're not, tapping around on your foot, trying to just jump, fall out, stick. And then we do the same thing, progress with med balls and distance and all of that. But that's a basic deceleration that we do. And obviously, we'll do sprinting decelerations where we'll just run and have to stop on a line or things of that matter. But a lot of decel is kind of built in on their football work. We'll cut down on that. We kind of follow, I guess going back to the program, we follow a structure of vertical integration when it comes to our modeling. So all of this goes into what is most important when it comes to the central nervous system and what we want to take from the central nervous system, what has to have the main focus. So each block, for lack of a better term, we kind of block up the year. We decide what elements are the most important to hit in regards to, physical standpoint, bioenergetic standpoint, standpoint of the tactical and technical nature of the sport, and a bunch of other things. So we just break that down. And so based off of what takes precedence in those blocks, we'll decide what plyometrics we do, if any. We'll take consideration of the decel work we'll have to do, if any, the strength movements, how much strength movement, speed work, our alactic power work, our aerobic work, elactic aerobic work, or whatever it may be. We kind of take a precedence of where everything falls to ensure that we're, in the optimal shape at that time for the needs of the sport at that time. So that dictates a lot with our jumping and sprinting and, our, running, everything. So.
Yeah, I think what's important to point out is all of those things, as you talk about the different forces, I think better prepare the body. I know I was at a small college with a small roster, and they had an inordinate amount of ACL injuries. The previous year I was there, and then the year I was there. And so we brought in, a athletic trainer, strength and conditioning guy. And we did all these things kind of, number one, a lot of these guys had to learn how to cut the right way, but also to start to teach them those movements to better stabilize those joints, right? To condition those joints as well. And it's, I think, an underutilized probably portion. It doesn't take a lot of time. I mean, you went through a whole progression there. It doesn't take a lot of time to add that into what you're doing.
No, that's the thing. It's all about, how your relationship between your muscles and tendons are, how they're going to respond to training. You have to consider that. And, body positioning is huge, ensuring that, because, and the biggest thing is conditioning as well, just overall general conditioning, because your form and everything that you do and you can work on is awesome. You can do a great job at all of that. As soon as you're fatigued, fatigue makes a coward out of anybody, and you start losing your form quick. So, a lot of times guys get fatigued, they get out of their realm of form, and they start getting injured. And it's not, anything other than them just being gassed and allowing themselves to get lazy. So that's a huge important thing. And I think the other thing too is, I think there's a big scare of overtraining people where, people want to pull back constantly when it comes, and that goes with the sports science. Everybody wants to pull back. Like, they don't go like, you're doing too much. Like, when in reality, the sport of football and the demand of the sport, you can't be, for lack of a better term, you can't be soft. You have to push, you have to go, and you have to be able to tolerate the loads and the velocities that you're going to be hitting. You need to get the exposures to ensure that you're handling that. Now, there are cases where, you're overworking. You need to pull back, and that's a lot. We all had those athletes that are just workhorses, but at the same time, the load management and recovery elements of it also play a lot in the injury prevention of athletes. You could do the best program in the world in the off season, and then they get in the ball and they're practicing, and you're not monitoring the loads and the velocities, and next thing you know, soft tissue starts coming up, and then you're not keeping up with their exposures to the velocities, and you're not getting used to kind of seeing monotony build up in practice, and there's no break in the monotony, there's no undulation in kind of practice structure, so the monotony builds up, and you look at an acute to chronic work to rest ratio, they start getting that chronic fatigue, and it starts affecting them negatively. And there's so much that goes into it when it comes to injury risk and developing the tissue and having the exposures, but realistically it's not overly hard, and you don't need the tech. The tech makes it a lot easier, but at the same time, as if you're in a high school setting, you just have to look at your practice structure and understand what a hard day is, moderate day, easy day, just by play counts,
right,
throw counts, whatever it may be.
There was a book that you mentioned. A couple of coaches had a question about that. What was the book you referenced?
I just read it. It was The Strength Manual by Mladen Janovic. He talks about his agile periodization model. It's a very good read. So I had that one that I just read during this whole quarantine deal. I went back and I'm reading What We Need is Speed by Henk. I can't even pronounce his last name. I think he's Dutch, a Dutch sprint coach. Went through some, Charlie Francis material again, just to get back into, looking at the speed work and all of that, trying to, get more ideas into how we're going to approach this. This is an awkward situation for us as strength coaches. So ensuring that we're getting the tissue and everything right for the season, whenever that may be. I'm just trying to get ideas. So good books though. Very good. I suggest them for anybody.
Well, Mike, I appreciate you taking the time here and joining us and sharing some ideas, and excited to see you continue to grow in this profession.
I appreciate it, Coach. And thanks for having me on. Like I said, it's really cool to see how much you build up this podcast. It's awesome, and everything that you're doing. I appreciate you as a coach. Obviously, I'm not somebody that I don't know how else to put it. I don't kiss anyone's ass. But, I really do appreciate you as a coach and all you did for me when I was playing. All the good times, like sophomore year playing fullback for you, that was one of the funnest times I ever had playing football. That Mount game was one of my favorite games, even though we lost. But at the same time, even on the hard times going through that senior season, I appreciate you being upfront with me and not kind of, for lack of a better word, being a coward about anything, being direct with me. And I think a lot of stuff that the relationship that we had when I was a player and you were a coach, and, guys like Coach Meyer, when he was there, Coach Ward, all those coaches that we had there, Coach Watts, I appreciate you guys being direct with me and, not dancing around anything at all. And it's rare to find that, and I think that's one thing I took as a coach was just that, you don't sugarcoat it. Don't be a coward about anything. Just tell it as it is, because the truth ain't gonna hurt nobody. And if it hurts, it hurts. But I really do appreciate that and all you did for me, because you brought some light in a situation that haunts me sometimes. So I appreciate it, man.
All right, Mike. You take care, man. We'll talk to you again soon.
We'll see you.
Coaches, again, I want to remind you of what we're doing with the football development model. Please push this down to your youth coaches. I think this is a great way for you to get some organization and structure beyond what you've already done. Check it out, all of our program development for youth football at fdm.usafootball.com. Again, check out our systems for blocking, tackling, and defeating blocks at footballdevelopment.com. If you register with your email, you get your choice of 3 free videos. There's some great things in there. I think things that as you get going again, you can get into the summer and maybe make up on some things that you might have lost if you had a spring ball, if you had time here in the spring to work on football. Some great drills for all those phases of contact. if you're enjoying the podcast, please head over to iTunes or your platform and give us a 5-star rate. If you have a minute, write a review. We really appreciate it, and we will read your review on our highlight show that we do at the end of the week.
Thanks for listening to USA Football's Coach and Coordinator Podcast. For more resources, visit the Coach Performance Center at usafootball.com.